All right, so we're
Okay.
continuing our journey through Schiller's mind. Last week we had the pleasure of going through Schiller's theories on beauty, which is great. Really good follow up to Plato's Philebus dialogue on the essence of good and how our mind comes to understand or develop a concept of the good, such that we can judge the good from the ugly. So there were some really important ideas. Schiller took it further and introduced even more questions, more paradoxes, more resolutions to paradoxes that I thought were very edifying. So we're going to continue on this. We have a second essay taken from Schiller, which I'm going to do a little screen share right now. Here it is. You guys can see that screen.
Yep.
Okay.
Of the sublime
Yeah,
toward the
we read
further
that
elaboration.
of the Sublime. Oh wait, no, we didn't read that. No, sorry. What am I saying? I'm
No.
stupid. There we go. Of the Sublime. Yes. Let me just make it bigger. Now, again, this was translated by a fellow by the name of Daniel Platt. I got this off the Schiller Institute website. Um, and as Daniel says, this is probably the first English translation that he knew about, the guy who translated it. And again, keep in mind, people might want to revisit some of the ideas of the finite and the infinite, the one, the many, and the infinite that we'd encountered in the Platonic dialogue. As we read through this, that it's all sort of a development of a common conception that's just taking it even further and penetrating into the secrets of the universe ever more deeply. So it's very nice. And again, this idea of the sublime is a highly contentious concept. And the oligarchy has their own notion of the sublime that they've been trying to force onto academia, onto acceptable philosophy, pertaining to something that has more to do with horror and something nihilistic pertaining to the awe, the magnitude of the immensity of nature and the uselessness or the inability, the forever inability for human beings to measure up to that infinite grandeur of the void of nature. And so there's a lot of these like more nihilistic interpretations of the sublime, which are a bit weird. Schiller's got a very different idea of the sublime, as we're all going to come to see pretty soon. So anytime people want to stop, ask questions, or throw a thought out, just do so.
Okay. Okay, first question. When was Schiller writing again? Middle of the 18th or 19th century?
Late
What?
18th century.
Late
Yeah,
18th. Okay, yeah. That
yeah,
situates it
1794,
situates it
1794
culturally. Yeah.
for this text.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Schiller was close friends with Alexander von Humboldt and Wilhelm von Humboldt as well, both of whom played a big role in shaping a classical humanist education reform. Wilhelm, philology, other things, but also Alexander, through his work on the cosmos, was a huge influence on American aesthetics, the American scientific school that was anti Newtonian of the 19th century, as well as many of the statesmen that I've written about, people like William Gilpin was entirely inspired as an identity by his studies of Alexander von Humboldt and Humboldt's work to take the Schillerian ideal of looking for the sublime, not just in the human domain, but in nature itself. So looking for traces of the divine, the spark of beauty and reason in nature, which gave rise to the Hudson River School of Painting. That we've hosted many classes on that topic in recent months, and yeah, I mean, there's just so much that grew out of this that was all snuffed out by the Huxley operation with the X Club, the Royal Society operation of the Newtonians that became the Darwinians of the Royal Society that worked to destroy concepts of metaphysics, the higher metaphysics from the realm of true science as well as arts. So it's really important that we really get back to this battleground of which Schiller was really at the cutting edge. So I think we're going to get a lot out of this. We don't have a reader today, so who would like to do today's Paul? How are you feeling for reading?
Yeah, I'm fine, mate. You know me. I'll volunteer. I mean, I don't jump into it straight away in case somebody else wants to do it, but I'll read anytime you want.
I've gotten a lot of good feedback from people who just listen to your voice and they
Yeah,
you read well. So just go slow and like
sure.
usual. And I'll just read the little one paragraph intro by Daniel. So it's called "On the Sublime." Oh, sorry, of the Sublime towards the further elaboration of some Kantian ideas Daniel Platt says this may be the first and only English translation of this essay by Friedrich Schiller, which provides valuable insights into the process by which he composed some of his most famous poems. Of the Sublime may perhaps have been eclipsed by the better known On the Sublime by the same author. It is posted here by permission of the translator. It's all yours.
Of the Sublime, toward the further elaboration of some Kantian ideas. Sublime we name an object at whose conceptualization our sensuous nature feels its limits, but our rational nature its superiority, its freedom from limits. In the face of this, we thus derive physically our brevity, which we surmount but morally, i.e., through ideas. Only as sensuous beings are we dependent. As rational beings, we are free. The sublime subject matter gives us, firstly, as beings of nature, to feel our dependence, while secondly, acquainting us with the independence that we, as rational beings, maintain over nature, within ourselves as well as without ourselves. We are dependent insofar as something outside us contains the reason why something inside us becomes impossible. So long as nature outside us conforms to the conditions under which something within us becomes possible, we cannot feel our independence. If we are to become conscious of same, then must nature be conceived of as conflicting with that, which to us is a requirement, and only through her cooperation possible, or, to say just as much, she must be found in contradiction to our impulses. Hence, all impulses that are efficient in us as sensuous beings can be attributed to two basic impulses. Firstly, we possess an impulse to change our circumstances, to give expression to our existence, to be efficient, which all amounts to gaining conceptions and can thus be called conception drive, cognition drive. Secondly, we possess an impulse to maintain our circumstances, to continue our existence, which impulse is named self-preservation.
All right, that's fantastic so far. So we have two concepts of how we express this quality of wanting to improve our circumstance and preserve ourselves within circumstances that may be hostile to us. That's important to start with. See where he goes.
The conception drive goes with cognition, the self-preservation drive with feelings, hence with inner perceptions of existence. We stand thus through these two kinds of drives in double dependence on nature. The first becomes palpable to us when nature is found wanting in the conditions under which we attain cognition. The second becomes palpable to us when it contradicts the conditions under which it is possible for us to continue our existence. Precisely thus do we maintain through our reason a twofold independence from nature. Firstly, in that we, in the theoretical sense, transcend natural conditions and can conceive of more than we perceive. Secondly, in that we, in the practical sense, brush aside natural conditions and can contradict our desires through our will. A subject matter at whose perception we experience the first is great in theory, a sublimity of cognition. A subject matter that allows us to internalize the independence of our will is great in practice, a sublimity of consciousness. In the case of the theoretical sublime, nature stands as the object of cognition in contradiction to the conception drive. In the practical sublime, it stands as the object of perception in contradiction to the preservation drive. In the one, it was considered mainly as a subject matter that ought to extend our cognition. In the other, it is conceived of as a power that can determine our own circumstances. Accordingly, Kant names the practical sublime the sublime of power, or the dynamic sublime as opposed to the mathematical sublime. Because the concepts dynamic and mathematical can shed no light on whether the sphere of the sublime is exhausted through these classifications, I have given preference to the classification into the theoretical and practical sublime. In what way we are dependent on natural conditions in cognition, this dependence becomes conscious for us, shall be sufficiently elaborated with the development of the theoretical sublime. that our existence as sensuous beings is made dependent on natural conditions outside ourselves will hardly require its own proof. As soon as nature outside us changes the determinate relationship to us, upon which our physical well-being is founded, then immediately our existence in the sensuous world, which is tied to this physical well-being, is challenged and placed in danger. Nature thus has the conditions in her power under which we exist, and so that we should pay heed to this relationship to nature, so indispensable to our being, a vigilant guardian has been given our physical life by way of the self-preservation drive, and by way of pain is a sentry given to this drive. Hence, as soon as our physical circumstances suffer a change that threatens to ordain those circumstances to their opposite, then pain reminds of the danger, and the impulse of self-preservation is summoned to resistance. If the danger is of the kind to which resistance were futile, then must fear ensue. Thus, an object whose existence conflicts with the requirements for ours is, if we do not feel that our power measures up to it, an object of fear, fearsome. But it is only fearsome for us as sensuous beings, for only as such are we dependent on nature. That in us, which is not subject to nature's law, has no commerce with nature outside us, considered as a power. Nature, conceived of as a power that admittedly can determine our state, but holds no sway over our will, is dynamically or practically sublime. The practical sublime differentiates itself thus from the theoretical sublime, in that the one conflicts with the conditions for our existence, the other only with the conditions for cognition. The theoretical sublime is a subject matter, insofar as it bears with itself the conception of infinity, whose representation the power of imagination feels itself unequal to. The practical sublime is a subject matter insofar as it bears with itself the conception of the danger, which our physical strength feels itself unable to overcome. We succeed to the temptation to form for ourselves a conceptualization of the first. We succumb to the temptation to oppose the power of the second. An example of the first is the ocean at rest, the ocean in storm, an example of the second. A colossally tall tower or mountain can produce a sublimity of cognition. If it bends down to us, then it will be transformed into a sublimity of consciousness. But have that again in common with one another, that directly through their contradiction to the conditions of our being and functioning, do they expose that power in us that feels bound to none of these conditions. Hence, a power that on the one hand can conceive of more than sense can grasp, and on the other fears no threat to its independence, and in its manifestations suffers no violence if its material carriage should fall victim to the frightful force of nature.
So far, any questions or anything like that? I mean, we're dealing with two different concepts of the sublime right now that involve our evidence of our independence from being just another aspect of nature.
I got a quick question. The word drive, would it be the five sense of the human? What the drive means? What?
Impulse.
Impulse. Impulse is an impulse is a reaction to something. So the five sense goes with it, or impulse could be something else than the human can feel.
It could be also a yearning for, like a yearning for something. What that thing is underdetermined sometimes, but it's like the thing that brings a potential into existence is that if we were just satisfied with being without any desire to preserve ourselves in a threatening situation or improve upon our condition, because for some reason our minds have been able to judge something as capable of being better, that awakens a yearning, a desire that's not specifically of the intellect, right?
Okay, because I had a little feeling it was about the five sense and how we react to everything. So that's why I asked if it was more than that. Sorry. And now I'm stuck on my own face. Sorry. I'm gonna try to set this up. Wow.
Maybe I can I don't know when you will solve your problem. Maybe I would suggest something for the notion of drive.
Oh,
Yeah, Quan, go for it.
Okay. So I think that once again, drive, I think that you are partially right, Jean-Sébastien, when you were speaking of the five senses, because you, once again, you can always think in terms of time or timelessness, okay? So the five senses are certainly part of the sources of drives because as you chose rightly the word reaction. Okay, you can receive an object through your five senses, and you would have a reaction because the five senses have been activated somehow. Okay, that's the level of the reflexes and the instincts. And you can also have a drive because you receive in your subconscious and your unconscious automatism. Okay, what is an automatism? It's a learning that has been done by imitation. So, because you are in a certain family, in a certain society, you will automatically, by imitation, make certain learning that will put in you certain drive. Okay, I know that it's a very cliche example, but if you're born in a family within which going to college is important, for example. Uh, you don't even need to be told that because of the atmosphere within the family. It will be something that will be put in your mind automatically. And that is the level of automatism. Okay, so the drives can be at the level of the reflexes, of the instincts, of the automatism. Okay, that's the animal kingdom, the drives coming from the animal kingdom. Okay, and all those together, I suggest to use the word desires. Okay, you can have the desire because of the
okay.
reflexes and of the instinct, but you can have desires because of stuff that you have learned by imitation, and that's called automatism.
Makes
Uh, and that's only the animal kingdom. But you also have the upper trigram or the being or the awareness kingdom. And then I suggest the word aspiration. Okay,
the
of
drive
course,
of the kingdom higher is aspiration and all that's invisible.
was that's the suggestion that I'm offering. Okay, because once again, the words is not the reality, but when we discuss philosophy, the introduction of words are useful because it makes distinction. Okay, it's the same than between time and timelessness,
A
becoming and
question,
being.
a little
Yeah,
question to make to think about while you're exposing this is if the lower triagram has 5 cents and everything now usually is duality and equivalent, would the higher triagram have 5 cents too, or five different drive of just
that's
to
an
be
ex
equal?
that's an excellent question. I would say that the answer that I would give is not an absolute answer. Okay,
We have to
there
find those
there can be
answers.
other answers to that. Okay, but I would say that it's the domain of the timeless form.
Yeah.
And the timeless form, the major timeless form is beauty, goodness, and truth. So I think that a word that Matthew used, yearning, can be a little bit equivalent to aspirations. Okay, because it is not necessarily a concept transmitted by words, even if we can use words to put a label on it. Okay, as I suggest, aspiration rather than desire. But here it's debatable. Once again, philosophy is deep understanding, but to express that deep understanding, you need to use words. So, as time and timelessness, for example. So, at the level of the awareness kingdom, that yearning is for something of the timeless reality. And that drive will be different. Okay, because I have read Schiller, Schiller would make the distinction between the sensuous drives, which is the drive of the animal kingdom, as distinguished biologically by
Nice.
it
Sensuous
reflexes,
drive is a good
instincts, and
word.
automatism. Okay, reflexes, instinct, and automatism. And Schiller would talk about the rational drives, which is more,
Oh,
those are his words, but that I
good.
use the timeless forms, the drives for the timeless form. And there, it would be something that you would feel if you are going into the epistemological development. Okay, some man would never feel that. And I would like to say that at the third line, according to Confucius, at 40 years old, I am no more confused. Okay, at 40 years old, I'm no more confused. Well, once again, the 40 years old is symbolic, but at 40 years old, I'm no more confused, meaning that I can navigate within my society first, but also that I feel that there's something more than the drives coming from the reflexes, the instincts, and the automatism. So there, you feel that, and the stuff that will make you capable to go into the drive of reason with a capital R is precisely called the classical education or the timeless education. Okay, it's not for nothing that it's called the timeless education, because it brings you into the timeless reality, or the aristocratic education, because it brings you to the aristocratic mind or the playful mind. Okay, and once again, I'm not saying that it's the absolute solution, but the solution saying that the mind has 6 layers would give the layer number 5 to the playfulness of the mind. And once again, it is a concept, it is a symbol. Okay, don't take it as an absolute. It's a way to understand the immensity of the mind.
Sounds good.
I came at it slightly more simplistically, actually, on the basis of some of the early things that I read just then. That, and you can talk about it if you like, one in terms of the separation between the two hexagrams, but
The
the
two
lower part,
trigrams.
yeah, trigrams rather. Sorry, the lower part, the sensory part, as you like, in the sentence that's on the screen. An example of the first is the ocean at rest. Now, if we think about that as as nature and the way in which we interact with nature on a biological level all of the time, when it's at rest, we cope with it. Okay, we're at its mercy to a degree, but we cope with it. When it becomes stormy, that's when we have to go to the upper trigram. We have to think our way through nature. We are not slaves to those effects. We actually have the capacity to get beyond certain aspects of nature. I mean, in the example that I've just given there, the ocean in storm, well, we invent a boat. We learn to ride out the storm.
Yeah. And I would like to show an image, once again, coming from the Chinese tradition, that show exactly the definition at the very first paragraph that you read. Okay, we feel the sublime when we are in contact with an object that make us feel the limits of our physical nature, but the infinity of our mind nature, right? And here is the Chinese object that show you perfectly that paragraph, conceptually speaking. Okay, so once again, it's a concept. You have to imagine the circle as an infinite circle, and that is an open circle. Okay, the
I got
white
a
part.
question, Quan.
Yes. Go ahead.
What do you mean by sublime?
Well, I repeat Schiller's definition because I think it's the best definition, one of the best definitions. The sublime is the feeling that you have when you are in contact with an object, making you feel the finiteness of your physical nature and the infinite of your mind nature. Okay.
So the
The
feeling
sublime
of
first
both is the sublimity.
okay. I give
So
a very simple synonyms of sublime. Uplifting. Okay, but sublime is more precise, because I'm sorry to repeat that, because it's one of the best definition. The sublime is an object that will make you feel your finite physical nature and the infinite of your mind nature
at the same time.
At the same time,
At the same time,
absolutely,
exactly.
absolutely. And I would say that in religion, there is a Latin expression that say it exactly, okay? Mysterium tremendum, okay? Or it is mysterious and it makes you feel fear, but at the same time, awe, okay?
Or,
Something that make you feel fear and awe at the same time, because it's very paradoxical. Fear is a feeling that will push you away from that object, and awe is a feeling that will attract you to that
You're
object.
attracted.
Okay, so sublime is a paradoxical emotion, and
Well,
that
while we're on this topic, he speaks also of two kinds of sublime, and I'm not sure I get it. Maybe you can help.
Okay, well, he was speaking of the power of the cognition and of the feeling. Okay, once again, I know that I like that concept because it helped me a lot. Always things in terms of time and timelessness.
Right.
We as human beings have a time dimension. We are born, we grow, and we will die one day. That is time. And the other dimension that is simultaneously present in us is timelessness, that is not subject to birth, to growth, and to death. Okay, once again, I show that image because that image is perfect. The black half is time, and the white half is timelessness. And you notice that there is a white dot in the black half, and there's a black dot in the white half, right? It means that time and timelessness are together, and that is the sublime precisely. When you are in contact with any object, with any experience that makes you feel that you are at the same time, and that is the key words, at the same time, finite and infinite. Or the other version that I showed the first reading, the character Wang for king, okay? The vertical line is the timelessness reality. The three horizontal lines is the time reality. And when I answer to Jean-Sébastien that the drives can be conceptually divided into the drives in time, what Schiller called the sensuous drives, and the drives in timelessness, what Schiller called the rational drives. It's about the three horizontal lines precisely. And you see there's one intersection, two intersection, and a third intersection, okay, between the vertical line and the three horizontal lines. I have a question for all of you. Why the time dimension is symbolized by horizontal lines? Why? Why not the reverse? Why not have a horizontal line for the timeless dimension with three vertical lines for the time dimension? But why timelessness is vertical and why time is horizontal, symbolically?
You can instantly go from one to the other. You can go up and down the ladder.
Yeah, okay. I think that your answer is original. It makes you think to a ladder, so you climb up the epistemological development. That is symbolically very interesting. I see that you have a philosophical mind, but there is another answer that I think is more fundamental.
I have a weird answer too. The first line, the timeline, the physical line, is a negative. And when you add the human in it, whatever it do, it does a positive. So the human makes the elevation of the time. Time keeps, and as he says, the human can go from up to down, but that's the positive of the human reality. So if you take a paper and a pen and you want to do a plus, you have to start by a minus.
Yes,
Worst philosophic answer.
no, that's very good too. I think the two are connected. The answer why the time dimension is horizontal is very simple. is the arrow of time.
The arrow of time.
Okay?
Yeah.
The arrow of time is horizontal. You are born, you grow, and you die one day.
Entropy.
Okay, and the vertical dimension is always timelessness. Why? Because first, symbolically, it resembles to a flame. Okay, a flame is vertical. So that is precisely, I always repeat that tradition is not the worship of dead ashes, but the transmission of the living flame. Okay, so the classical education is precisely the activation of that verticality within all of us.
I really love this sentence.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write
And
it.
if that verticality is not activated, you live in the horizontal dimension, meaning, and it's not so bad. I mean, you are born one day, you have a fun life, and you die one day. But it's not the same when that, if you're capable to introduce with that horizontality that is given by nature, if you're capable to introduce the verticality, the inner flame,
No, it's an interesting idea because the flame
that
as
is
well,
better.
unlike the other unlike the other three elements, the flame doesn't organically just go, it's not obedient to gravity. It yearns to move away from the pull of gravity towards the heavens. So it is a nice metaphor for that which unites the finite with the
Also,
heavens.
flame is sun and Apollo, higher ground. Flame is different.
You can use a mythology that you like. I prefer to stay in abstract concept, but of course that you can have what I would call a mythological figure associated with that. But
right. No, yeah, it's a very poetic idea. It's very wide open for the mind, and I think the second aspect, because this is a lot of
that inner awareness. Okay.
Yeah. I think a lot of this is touched on clarifying the theoretical sublime and the feelings associated with that, as far as the conception of the infinity and the representation that it imposes on the imagination of the that which is finite. Which naturally has like a tension, a sense of that there's an incommensurability, which is that has a feeling association. It's not just purely a logical idea. But the practical sublime is something that I don't think we've really touched on so much in this conversation, which Schiller has impressed upon us, which is a subject, as he says, insofar as it bears with itself the conception of a danger which our physical strength feels unable to overcome, but more is attached with that, right?
I would like to remind that the subtitle of the text of the Sublime is toward the further elaboration of some Kantian ideas. Okay, for those who don't know Kant, he offered two dimensions of reading of reality. The theoretical aspect, what he called the pure reason, and the practical aspect, what he called the practical reason. Okay, and when Schiller is speaking of the theoretical aspect and the practical aspect of the sublime, it is exactly what Kant meant. And I would like to make the difference between Kant and Schiller after or now, as you wish. But I would like to remind everyone, theory or theoria or theory comes from Greek theoria, right? And does anyone remember the meaning of the Greek theoria? Because it's not theory, okay? Because in English, theory means a speculation. But the Greek theoria doesn't mean speculation. What does it mean?
Isn't it something to do with a god?
Excuse me?
Something to do with like a god. Like Theo, isn't that God?
Dio.
No, theoria. That's true that in Greek, God is theos. You're right, but theos and theoria are not related. It's a coincidence.
Well, it says here, theoria is a Greek for contemplation. Within Eastern Orthodox theology, it refers to the state of illumination in which one becomes aware of God and all that is and is not that has ontology in God.
Okay, So for Plato, theoria means contemplation of the pure forms. Okay, and the pure form for Plato are beauty, goodness, and truth. So once again, here Schiller is making the difference between the vertical reality, the inner flame, the vertical inner flame, and the practical dimension when we are in interaction with nature, right? So once again, I want to come back to the definition at the very beginning of the first paragraph. If you can always remember that definition, it will help you to understand the text. The sublime is the feeling that you have when you interact or when you are in a contact with an object, making you realize the finite dimension of your physical reality and the infinite reality of your mind. Okay, that is what is called the feeling of sublime. When you have simultaneously that feeling of finite and infinite, the two realities in you.
Well, you're describing always the first theoretical sublime. Clearly, you're doing that. The practical sublime you're not doing though, where he describes the
While
ocean at rest for the first and the ocean in a storm for the second. That's different from what you're describing the
but
first one, which is good that you're doing that, but the second one is also very important.
the second
He
one is
mentioned,
precisely, you gave an example from the text matter on the three horizontal lines. Okay, when you are, for example, in contact with the ocean and so on, and that you are feel that there's some fearsome feeling in you, what is activated on the horizontal dimension? The sense perception,
Yep,
the intellect.
to a degree.
Okay, so that's why you are fearsome.
Well,
So
there's fear, right? Yeah, yeah. The sense that you might end, that you might
yes,
die in the context of
absolutely.
yeah.
And that comes from the fact that you have what I call with the character Wang, the first horizontal lines is called in the Chinese tradition Earth, the middle horizontal line is man, and the top horizontal line is heaven. Or if we use the 6 layers of the mind, the example in relation to the ocean or stormy sea activates the first line, sense perception, and the second line, intellect. Okay, and that is the practical, because once again, the theoretical is vertical and the practical is horizontal. And here I would like to ask a question which is very important. I always say that the timeless form of beauty in time is the mind powers of justice, and the timeless form of goodness in times are the mind powers of humanity and valor, and the timeless form of truth in time is the mind powers of wisdom. Is it only by the pedantic proclivity that I make that distinction, or there is a reason why I make that distinction?
oh, there's a reason. That's kind of why I'm here. I want to kind of figure it out for myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yes, but are you capable to give some hypotheses now, or you prefer to take some time to think about that?
Well, I don't know. Like, I know in the beginning he was like, well, he's leading up to Sublime. He's talking about like some people, the people who are sensuous people, they're they're dependent on their surroundings,
Sure,
and
but why
then
why are they
he well, I don't want to go there yet. Then on the rational, he's talking about rational people, like I guess right brain people, and he mentioned that they have a certain kind of
oh,
freedom, and but then he
I,
goes on
I would
and
like to interrupt you
and
here.
Well,
Okay,
hold on, let
okay,
Kelly finish his thought.
on,
Let's see where he
keep
goes.
on, keep on. Sorry.
well he goes on and like and the way I see it, like freedom is good, dependent is bad, but then he goes on and and that when he talks about the timelessness and everything, and he says that freedom this rational thought can get you into trouble. And then he's pointing out the advantages of being sensuous. I can't give
Yeah,
you the quote there, but that's kind of
but
the gist of what I got so far out of the reading.
once again, and I take the liberty to consider that what we read about the beautiful last week is part of our discussion. Okay, if you remember what we
Yeah,
read about the beautiful last week, he said that freedom is the form that will give the essence of the beautiful. Okay, if you remember, last week
he
it was
said
about
freedom is
beauty.
he said
Last week,
freedom is one with beauty.
well, to be precise, he said, or he wrote, the perfection of the material is one dimension, that is the animal kingdom dimension, but what will give the quality of beautiful is precisely the freedom that is present in the perfection of the material form, if you remember.
He also spoke of beauty. I believe it could be found in the form of intent.
Yes, but I want to repeat that again, okay? Because Schiller, as in the syllabus or as in the Chinese classical education, is making the difference because there are two major concepts around which everything is deployed. Okay, and those two major concepts is the finite dimension and the infinite reality.
Yeah.
Okay, I took some minutes to say that why the infinite reality is symbolized by verticality, because it's the inner flame, and why the finite dimension is symbolized horizontally, because it is the arrow of time, birth, growth, and death. And in everything that Schiller would explain, the theoretical reality is the presence of the flame of awareness, and everything that he would label with the word practical is about the horizontal realities. But what I want you to notice that the horizontal reality is not only in the animal kingdom, it is also in the awareness kingdom. Okay, because Matt was stressing the fact that why he had that emotional reaction when there was a stormy sea and so on. I was saying that it's because it activated the layers called sense perception and the layer called the intellect. But you would see later on in the text that he would touch on dimensions which are not in the animal kingdom, but would be higher in the awareness kingdom. And that is why I brought back the Chinese notion of personal sovereignty, the vertical line for infinite awareness, and the three horizontal line for the time dimension, for qualities who are expressed in the time dimension. But the time dimension is not only at the animal kingdom, it can also be at the awareness kingdom.
Can I
Epistemological journey.
just to be sure about the Sublime two layers, I'd say, can I give an example that I came up with and you say if it's good, okay? Just to be sure.
We are here to
Yesterday,
discuss.
it won't be long. Yesterday I'm walking and I saw this. It's a statue. It's a beautiful statue of a sexy lady in a yard. I see this in the present. It rise emotion in my sense. So this made by someone at one time in history. I see it at that time in history, but makes me think of all the women I had and all the beauty of the woman. It's the mix of the present thing that makes me think infinitely about my experience. Is that a good definition of the sublime both ways in?
It is absolutely a good example,
Thank
because
you. Sorry for
what
the picture. It doesn't show
no,
great, but it's a great statue. I tell you, I was amazed by the beauty of that statue in
yeah,
my neighborhood.
because what you felt at that moment is that the finite dimension in you, but also simultaneously
Yeah.
the infinite reality in you.
Yeah.
Okay, because once again, Schiller, he wrote like a classical author, and there's a principle in writing classical text is that you put at the beginning the main idea from which everything else, even if you write 5,000 pages, wouldn't be only the explanation and the development of the main idea that has been expressed in the first paragraph.
Okay. I
There's
think
a
I
good
got it.
example. Good example, Jean. A very good example there, going
Thanks.
from the
But
particular, the
I had
specific.
the luck to see it.
Yeah, but I mean, the way you phrased it, then I just thought that was a really good example. Going from you see a statue of a beautiful woman, and all of a sudden your mind is off in the direction of all of the beautiful women you might have met or
Yeah,
contemplated or whatever. That's ties the ideas together rather nicely, I think.
great. Just
It's an
wanted
easy,
to make
it's an
sure it
easy,
was a good one.
an easy metaphor for us to relate to.
Yes,
Great.
and that is the core of the timeless education, or the classical education, or the aristocratic education. Okay. Once again, I bother everyone by asking the following question: Educare. What is the meaning of educare?
Educare.
Because it has to do with what we are reading.
To bring forth that which is within.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
bring forth
But
that which is within. And that which is within means that it doesn't depend on your family, it doesn't depend on your society, it doesn't depend on the reflexes, the instincts, and the automatism, right? Because the automatism is a medical word or technical biological word to say all the learning that you got by imitation. Okay, the fact that you speak English with a certain accent, it was by imitation. Okay, because your first language was French. So the melody of the first language will always be dominant compared to your second, third, or fourth language. So a lot of things that comes from your family and the society is the second and the third line. That is family and society. The first line, the sense perception, is from nature. Okay, but the fourth, the fifth, the sixth line, it's not your family, it's not nature. Nature in the sense of the animal kingdom, because we can say nature in a broader sense, of course, and your family, your society that will construct the intellect and the social sophistication, second and third line. That is what Schiller will talk about the practical dimension compared to the theoretical dimension.
So once we figured out all the things that we imitated, um, I think the way I'm thinking, my next job would be to what my genetic makeup, like all the things that I do that I inherited from previous generations in my
Oh, sure.
genes.
That's called the genetic memory. Of course, maybe you have the nose of your great grandfather if you have
Yeah,
a
but
photo.
what I'm saying is that necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, or like how would that incorporate into this infinite?
Well, it's not.
I'd have to like kind of analyze the genetic part, like, wouldn't I?
Well, it's neither good nor bad. I mean,
Well,
your
same with the
physical.
imitation, what, like my father taught me to do this, to drink, how to wash my hands.
Yeah,
It's,
that's part of the
maybe
intellect.
there's another way to wash my hands.
Absolutely. Okay.
yeah, sure.
Absolutely. You know that the Japanese during the Second World War, some Japanese spies were caught in China because they wash their face this way. Okay, it's very automatic. Okay, they wash their face this way. The Chinese, they just do a rotational movement. So when Japanese speak perfect Chinese, but when they saw him wash his face like that, he has been identified as a Japanese spy, because, and that's an example of automatism. Okay, because you cannot control those stuff. It's in your subconscious because you learned it very young by imitation.
There's even more than that, because Rupert Sheldrake introduced the idea of epigenetics into the equation as well, that we actually inherit an awful lot more than just the physical traits. We inherit more than just the physical traits. In some cases we can inherit the traumas that previous generations might have experienced.
But epigenetics means we have the ability to change that somehow in our head.
No, because no, epigenetics
we can reverse those genes.
I'm sorry to be a little bit stubborn here, but it's the doctor who's speaking. Epigenetic means that the influence that you receive when you were in the womb of your mother. Okay, so what happened during the 9 months that you were in the womb of your mother? That time period just passed, and for example, if a woman was drinking alcohol or was smoking drugs, for example, during her pregnancy, that was an epigenetic factor that cannot be changed. Okay. So epigenetic is the genes coming from your ancestors, and epigenetic is the events happening during the 9 months when you were in the womb of your mother. And we can talk to the end of the world about the horizontal dimension, of course. But what Schiller insists here is that we have a horizontal dimension, but we also have a vertical reality. Okay, that is the main stuff. I'm sorry to be a little bit overbearing, but I want to stress that. Okay, and it has been said in the first paragraph, the 10 first lines.
I guess I'm just trying to do all the other things to see how it all fits together. So I apologize for that.
I don't know, but you don't have to apologize. I don't apologize when I interrupt people or I say what I have to say. So just say what you have to say.
Like, I guess with the epigenetic thing, because there's different aspects of, like, I was born with a defect in my collarbone here, which has a bump, which is exactly about 2 years before I was born. My father broke his collarbone in falling down a soccer stadium staircase. And there's no other reason I could come up with why I would be born with that defect, except that something of that break was somehow imbibed within the actual genetic makeup that produced me. And I found examples online of like fathers who like had their fingers cut off and had children born with no fingers.
I am one example like that. I got a part of my hair that's missing, and my 2 sons are both born with that same part of the hair that's been ripped off. They don't have it naturally from the born.
It's interesting. Yeah, no, I've seen a lot of examples of this, and it's not explainable in the Darwinian matrix, but it does seem to be a common thread.
Sheldrake talks about it, Matt.
Yeah, no, I
read
some Sheldrake. Yeah, no,
his idea of epigenetics doesn't concern itself with just the 9 months of pregnancy. He's talking about traumas. It's probably best expressed beyond merely the individual, but let's say the whole generation of men that survived the Second World War.
Yeah,
that some of their experiences, the terror, you name it, get carried forward and can be transmitted genetically in some way. The mechanism is not clear and well known, is my understanding of my reading of Sheldrake's work. But nonetheless, it can go back certainly more than one generation is what Sheldrake has more or less said. And I don't know how
Well, that's what I was
emphatic he
thinking
is
about
on
it, because
that
I was thinking
idea,
about
but
the higher quality, like the other level of genetic memory that might involve, let's say, a mother or grandmother who was excessively beaten, while the child was gestating or what have you, and some people are just they born with like they have a tendency to neurotic
Yes,
hysteria or
yes.
things like that,
Like
and they're just
cats
not
and
aware of why
cucumber.
they are. But as a
or
That
psychologist
alcoholism.
who's helping people like that,
that
Juan, yourself, is it not the case that if they become self-aware, they will no longer be influenced or dominated by those multi-generational
yeah.
uh dynamics, right? They're not.
Well, dynamics is maybe a better word than epigenetics, okay?
Hmm.
Because
Mm.
the case of the woman that has been mistreated during her pregnancy, for example, there are clear biological mechanisms that explain why the
Yep.
baby in her womb would not have the same brain than the baby in the womb of a woman that has been well treated, right? So there we can have clear bio-neural mechanism that can be explained. Uh, I am not saying that the present medical knowledge is complete, far from it for sure. But within the very narrow confines of the present medical understanding, epigenetic is absolutely related to the 9 months during which the baby is in the womb of the woman. However, I'm not saying that's the truth. There are many things that we don't know the mechanism
Yeah.
and that are still under investigation. That's for
Yeah.
sure. That I'm not going to go into a battle to
No,
define the concept
but
that
that's pretty
epigenetics is restricted to 9 months, of course.
that's pretty much what Sheldrake says. He posits a theory about the potential for genetics going back several generations, in fact, but it's not something that you can nail down and prove. As you
Yeah.
said, there are areas of medical knowledge that do prove that. We all know the effects of alcoholism, for example, on babies
Yeah.
born to alcoholic mothers. Yeah.
But once again, and I want to remind that horizontal dimension, which is very important because that practical dimension has intersects, okay, every day, every second of our life with the vertical flame of awareness. And we said that educare means to bring forth what is from within, and that is what is from within that we can bring forth with the classical education, the timeless education, or the aristocratic education. What are those stuff? We talked of one of those stuff last time, the beautiful beauty,
Yeah.
okay, translated in time in the horizontal dimension as the mind powers of justice. Why there is a distinction between the two? Because the vertical dimension is the vertical dimension is something of the universal order that has always been there and is part of the structuration of the whole universe. But in our human life, when we epistemologically reach to that level of awareness, it translates into the mind powers of justice. And for the other timeless form of goodness, okay, horizontally, in what does it translate according to you?
Good question.
You know the answer because we talk about those stuff. The vertical, timeless form of goodness, in what cardinal virtues does it translate when expressed in time?
Cardinal virtue.
Morality.
Yeah.
A love of justice,
A
love
love
of
of justice
wisdom,
is love of justice is at the timeless form of beauty that we said that in the
Vigilance.
horizontal time dimension, it translates into the mind powers for justice.
I'd say the
So,
cardinal virtue of prudence,
yes,
the
it's one of the
infinite
two.
vigilance.
Yes, in English we say temperance or moderation. Okay, but
Sorry, I'm French.
No, that's okay. That's okay. It's not. I'm not blaming you. I'm saying simply that
Thanks
your
for
answer
the
is good.
information.
Yeah, and there is another cardinal virtues which translate horizontally with the timeless form of goodness.
I'm partially thinking of an associated one of courage to be able
Yes,
to be, yeah, courage, valor, like
valor,
Valor.
valor. Exactly. Courage or valor is the same. We agree with that. So the last timeless form of truth horizontally, to what does it translate?
Fine.
There's a cardinal virtue that
Oh,
translate
cardinal virtue.
that translate into time. Okay, when I say
I'm still thinking
translate
of like
into,
wisdom, but or love of wisdom.
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so it's not a pedantic distinction. Okay, it's just to say that the vertical dimension of reality is that inner vertical flame of awareness. But when you reach to that concentration of awareness, and I'm perfectly aware that concentration of awareness is a little bit clumsy. If you have a suggestion, please don't be shy.
Well, I like to suggest, like, not suggest, but when I'm looking for that inner entity inside myself, um, it's really hard to distinguish what that is, because wherever it is, it's a quiet whispering feeling. So that, I think that's kind of our discussion now, is like we're talking about our you know, our body, what we inherited from our parents, what we imitated. We talked about this genetic stuff. So what I'm doing is I'm eliminating that. Like, I'm kind of being aware of that. Then I eliminate it, and I try to feel inside. Well, what's left?
That's
You know,
precisely what we were making as
heart, right?
distinction. Yes, absolutely. That is the precisely what the Confucianist said, that at 40 years old, symbolically, I'm no more confused. Okay?
And
I'm no
just
more
good for the
confused as a down to earth explanation that I'm capable to navigate within my society in a skillful manner. That's the down to earth explanation for I'm no more confused. But the more metaphysical explanation is exactly what you just said, Kelly. Because if we accept the idea, because once again, it's not the reality. Okay, the hexagram showing the 6 layers of the mind divided in the animal kingdom and the awareness reality. Please don't take it as the reality. Okay, it's a concept, it's a symbol for guiding
It's a
people to
guideline.
understand the epistemological growth, and that Schiller would say exactly the same. Okay, because and at the third line, that is precisely the crossroads. Okay, where you are no more confused, you feel that there's something else. And maybe 40 minutes ago, Jean-Sébastien was talking about the design and the aspiration. Okay, because I remember your question, what is a drive? Okay,
design
okay,
aspiration.
and that is precisely the words by Schiller. He would make the distinction between the sensuous drive, the time dimension of the animal kingdom, and the rational drive, the awareness kingdom. But here, be very careful. The rational can refer to the intellect. But when Schiller used the word rational, it's about the reason with a capital R. It's not about the intellect.
What do you mean by that?
The intellect is the second layer of the mind. Okay, once again, the animal kingdom, the first layer is the sense perceptions. Okay, the second layer is the intellect, the capacity to talk, to make concept, to categorize, to make images, to create concepts. That's the second line, which is the intellect. The word the rational can refer to the second line, intellect. But here, when Schiller is speaking about the rational, it is about reason with a capital R. It's not about intellect. It's about lines 4, 5, 6. It's about the timeless form of beauty, goodness, and truth, or translated in time as my powers for justice, my powers for valor and humanity, and my powers for wisdom. So that's why when he speak about sensuous and rational, it's the same than time and timelessness, becoming and being, or lower trigram and upper trigram.
About the triagram, I just came up with something since you say the vertical one is within. I've came upon a sentence someone said, as within, as without, made me talk about as above, so below. So I just wondering, this vertical line could be above, within, and sublime theoretical. And the horizontal line would be below, without, and sublime practical, in a way.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting as distinction.
I'm trying to mix two thematic together, and I find they fit quite well.
Yeah, that's why the notion of sublime is so interesting and so fascinating and so existential. Okay, because in one word it combines our finite dimension and our infinite reality. Okay, and once again I repeat myself, but that's the core stuff that everyone should learn in their life. Okay, that there is a finite dimension in us and infinite reality in us, and it's only by activating the vertical infinite reality that you will truly be playful and free. Okay, because let's not forget the beautiful of our last discussion. The beautiful is the combination of the perfection of the material dimension, the animal kingdom, the time dimension, with the freedom. And that is the freedom that will give rise to the beauty.
Humanity could be put in a economic graph with this. Like time will be the horizontal graph, and the more there is human who are gentlemen, aristocrat, and intelligent, it will be higher, like a positive income. And the more we got a scum society, it will be lower, and we go into despair and destruction. So viewing this way makes it so important that people refine themselves to be better persons, so we get a good outcome from society.
Well, if someone lives in the vertical center, okay, because we have the two together, okay, I think that's why I say that this image is perfect, because the circles show that they are in harmony. Okay, you need the two halves. You need the black half and you need the white half. It means that you have a horizontal dimensions, but if your life is centered in the vertical awareness dimension, it will make you take your decision in a much healthier way than if you are centered in the horizontal dimension. For example, if you think that the resources are limited, for example, okay, if you think that the resources are limited, so it would be a world when you wouldn't fight for limited resources. That is a life centered on the horizontal dimension. But if you think that creativity, playfulness, and awareness is the center of your life, you will never be defined by the idea. Maybe idea is too noble a word for that. You will not be defined by the notion that you would have to fight for a limited quantity of resource, because since you are centered.
And the playful mindedness can come up with crazy good idea of dividing resource to grow more, and
Yeah.
any other idea that come from the human mind to increase what is physical, like turning a stone
Exactly.
into a statue.
Exactly. It doesn't mean that the physical, limited, finite dimension is not there, but it's not the center of your life. I see that your cat is interested in the
Mine too
discussion.
is on the
I
screen, so
always
it's
thought
funny.
that I always thought that he's a philosophical cat.
He is a philosopher king. Yes, he's the Lion
Yeah,
King, the philosopher
yeah,
Lion King.
I
yeah.
got mine too.
So and once again, Schiller started with the main idea of his composition, the first 12 lines, and that is the way to write a classical composition. You state at the start the core of your text, and after you develop that text or that
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, like what we just read, there's so much information in what's there. Like I think this talk that we've had for the last half hour or so, just just to break it down,
Yeah.
that was very important.
And as a practice, don't take it as a recipe, okay? Because I would hate that people would take that as a recipe. But to understand Schiller and all classical authors, always think in terms of the crossroad between the horizontal dimension, time, and the vertical reality, timelessness, or becoming and being, or the lower trigram and the upper trigram,
All at the same time.
all at the same time. Exactly. And when you have that together, as in this image, okay, because that image first, the circle is a finite circle because it's on a paper, but with the power of your mind, you have to imagine that's an infinite circle that is not closed, okay? And that infinite circle that is not closed, making your two dimension, the finite dimension symbolized by the black color, and the infinite dimension symbolized by the white color. And the two are together symbolized by the circle. And that is precisely this image is exactly the same than the word sublime and the 12 lines by Schiller, which explains what is sublime.
I got a really cool Rembrandtian version of the image you just showed from the I've got to show it. It's just, and I think the light darkness playfulness and also the openness of the idea is a really great expression of a higher emotional education on the epistemological development. And I'm just going to show it right now, keeping in mind
From the picture.
Kwan's yin
Sorry,
yang
mate.
image that he showed.
Yeah, the picture
I
from
shared
the
in the
chat.
chat box, but do you guys
Yeah.
see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
what do you get out of that?
What do you get out of that? Well, what is it? What are you looking at? Can you describe
Well, you
it?
see a ship,
Yeah.
a ship in a storm,
Ship
and
is-
everyone's playing their part to keep that ship from turning over.
Yep.
Well, some people are playing a stronger part.
Some
those
people are
in the
playing a
light-
much stronger part. Yes.
Those in the light are playing a much stronger part than those in the dark that seem to be talking about things
Okay,
rather
yeah.
than doing things.
That's
I
right.
see that now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because the first thing that is obvious for me that there is light at the center and darkness on the periphery.
That
Okay.
caught me too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well,
Okay. And it's kind of symbolic too. Okay. Light at the center.
Yeah.
What light at the center of your being.
Well, those people who are the most proactive in
On the
actually doing something, are they in the darkness predominantly
They
or
are in the
in the light? Right.
I feel like everybody on the left is active and everybody on the right is inactive. Maybe the storm of life brings forth the living in the human. That's how I feel it. And by the way, they are 12,
Right.
like the apostle, and many picture despite 12. people always, like in the basilic, it's 12 top. It's always 12.
There's a guy in the dark. He looks like Jesus. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's
There's,
the 13 one is the Jesus hidden.
Yeah.
Well, that guy right
Yeah.
there, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
Jesus one.
like, I
And-
don't know if he's there because he's in the cave. He went back into the cave,
Well,
or
it's
Ah,
the
there
story.
you
The painting is literally called "The Storm on the Sea of Galilee," right?
oh,
So it's a story that carries with it, like the image carries a story with it that has a moral context.
so that is Jesus then.
Oh yeah, most certainly, yeah, that's right. And let's see, there's one,
Yeah,
two,
the 12.
3, 4, 5. This guy's puking.
Oh.
This guy's actually vomiting off the side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 12. That's right.
Ah, I
Uh,
thought it was behind la voile. La voile. I thought that you were talking about this shadowy person. Looks like the dark spot just over the guy like this.
Yeah.
Under the voile, la voile. I don't know how to say in English.
oh, the
The veil.
the
The veil.
Yeah,
Sail.
right there, right there.
That guy.
You close right there, to the right a little bit.
this guy.
The shadowy stuff under the voile. A little bit to the right.
Oh, that guy.
Over, top.
Oh,
Just
this
little
one
bit
in
up.
blue, maybe.
Over.
Maybe in blue.
You're close.
Yeah.
I see this guy looking at
The
us.
little dark shade under the voile looks like a face.
Oops.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I don't see a face.
In
No.
you
I don't see a
follow the
face, man.
rope, follow the
And
rope.
by the way, there's not 12. There's 13 people on the boat.
Where's the 13th? I is that
The guy
guy here?
throwing
It
up.
was the guy
Huh?
behind.
The guy throwing up.
Oh yeah. There's 13. That's right. There's 13. There's this
Oh.
guy praying. There's this guy praying. This guy throwing up. That's 2. 1, and then 3, 4, 5. Here looking at Jesus, or two looking at Jesus. That's 5. One guy looking over at the people doing something.
There's 6 in that area,
And then
Matthew,
there's
not
6,
5. There's
7,
6.
and then 8, and then 9, 10, 11,
Yeah,
12,
it's
13. That's right.
13
There's
with the cute
13.
boy. You're right.
Because you know who this guy is who's looking at us, right? Who's
But there's
hat on
12
looking at the
apostles
audience?
and one Jesus.
No.
It has to be 13.
Well, no, there with
Yes.
Jesus there's 14, but there's 13. There's
No,
13 other
no,
people.
no, there's 13.
Yeah,
13 with
Paul is
Jesus.
correct. This guy
So
looking at us.
Jesus and the 12 disciples
This guy
would still
looking
be
at
a
us.
symbolic interpretation.
That's right.
Yeah.
This
Is.
guy looking
That's
at
what I
us
think.
is Rembrandt.
Yeah.
Oh, he draw himself
Well,
in the picture.
Yeah, he drew himself in the picture
well,
looking
oh,
at the
so
audience. So the
sweet.
point of Rembrandt's paintings is they often incorporate the
Himself,
audience as part of the experience. It's a performative process.
He's like Tarantino in the movie Endless Night with the vampires, where he decided to play in his own movies. Do that a lot
Well,
of
this is a
time.
little bit different because he's really trying to get you as an audience to become self-aware by being a part
Yeah.
of the. He's having a dialectic with the audience to become
So
themselves. He's communicating a message. There's a moral lesson, as he's himself
Yeah.
sort of half in the light, half in the darkness, right?
Yeah.
There's no
He's
big
struggling.
moral with Tarantino.
Yeah,
So-
but
so
there's
would
a
you say
question.
this picture is Sublime?
Yeah. Yes. I was going to that, Kelly. Exact. Thank you. To what extent it is sublime? To what extent it makes you feel simultaneously the
Well,
finite and the infinite?
like your definition, there's fear, and yet there's a part that is like I have to. Well, I gotta keep that boat, regardless of the fear. I have to keep that thing going.
Absolutely. And I would say that from the image standpoint, it has been illustrated perfectly with the light at the center, the darkness around. And as you said, Kelly, you have the fear, but at the same time, you have the light, and the people who are in the light are acting in an intelligent manner. They are doing stuff that we think that will make the boat not capsize and go home, if you want. Okay, so
The wave
That's-
is really pretty,
yeah, and wow, that's sublime.
crazy, beautiful.
Well, yeah, I think it's the transformative power, right? Like all of these Platonic ideas what makes them platonic ideas is the power that they have to transform us into our better selves. It's the power of transformation. So the thing with classical art is it's never literalistic, right? It's showing you something that is like causing you to self-reflect on what would I do? Would I be shit in my pants in a life-threatening situation, or would I be able to keep my wits about me? And the light of reason, like light has always been used as a metaphor for reason in Plato's cave. It's very heavy in Platonic philosophy, and I think it's very heavy here too, right? Where there's a certain type of light emanating from Jesus, and people are trying to use that or have that light substitute their own moral courage versus those people who are actually like acting like courageous people in the light of reason. Like they've got their minds completely there, and they've taken leadership when it's needed.
The impossible question to answer about this paint is, if Rembrandt chose to put himself in the position of one of the 12 apostles, which one was it?
No, he's 13. He's 13.
Well, and even more
The 13 is
interestingly,
Jesus.
even more interesting, Jean, if you have a look at the rope that he's holding onto, that pretty much defines the picture into two halves.
Oh,
If we're talking about the light and the dark in this picture, that
yeah.
rope, whatever it is that Rembrandt is literally holding on
Vision.
to me, seems to be the definition of one side, the right side being the dark and the left side being the light. And he's on the side of the light.
I see that. Yeah,
True.
yeah, it definitely has that yin yang vibe to it. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, a perfect expression of the yin yang,
Yeah.
Quan. Perfect.
Well, I would say that, let's say, beyond the contour expression, okay, because the yin yang diagram, or the exact name of that diagram is not yin yang, but diagram of the supreme reality, okay, and it talks a lot more about the usefulness or the symbolic intention of that diagram of the supreme reality, meaning that we have a finite dimension and an infinite reality dancing together, okay, and that diagram of supreme reality, Tai Chi Tu, or the painting by Rembrandt, illustrate perfectly that coexistence of not light and darkness, okay, because darkness most of the time has a very negative undertone, but rather of time and timelessness, because time means that there is birth, growth, and death, and timelessness is outside of time and is always and forever a light. Okay, that is why it's the vertical dimension, meaning that is the light that is showing you the direction, or if you want, a lighthouse. So that is why it's always that duality, but that duality is the problem, because the classical education is not inviting you to the duality. The classical education is inviting you to the integration. Okay, and I asked you a question in the Chinese diagram of the supreme reality. The duality is clear. You have the black and the white, and you have a black dot into the white part, and the white dot into the black part, meaning that you have timelessness in time and time in timelessness. But graphically here, what is the symbol?
Motion.
Okay,
Interrelationships.
yes, I think that you all have the answer, okay, but graphically it's the circle, but you have to understand that circle, but you have to understand that circle as being an infinite circle and an open circle, okay, because in time we have to make a circle on a paper, but that's not
But inside
the
you
real
have
circle.
you have two inner circles, and one's white and one's black, and then that's inside the one big circle.
Yeah. In the painting of Rembrandt, what would be the symbol of the unity or of the integration?
Oh, that light and darkness.
Excuse me?
The light parts and the dark parts.
I'd say
Okay,
the boat or the
but that's the
water,
duality. That's the duality.
Yeah,
Light
where's
and
the
darkness.
integration? Yeah.
the boat.
What is graphically the symbol for the integration in that painting? In
Uh,
this
uh,
is the
Jesus,
circle. Excuse me?
Jesus, maybe perhaps like because he's the light and the dark part.
That's certainly a possible answer.
The boat. The boat is in the dark, in the light. It's something that been done physically,
So
but
that's the circle.
inspire infinite. So I'd say the
Okay.
boat.
Okay, that is another answer, certainly. My answer is the whole picture, is the whole painting.
All good.
Okay, the supreme reality includes light and darkness and everything in those two. And you have to imagine that the frame is infinite, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got the big picture answer, and I got just the boat, but the boat includes the boat is including boat, but you thought
Yeah.
about the
It's a
thing that includes the boat in it.
We
It's
are
within without of the same thing.
Gentlemen, we are having a philosophical discussion. There are no good answers. Okay,
Yeah.
There are no bad answers.
there are no good.
It's better
and
no
there are
bad than no
answers.
It's a
good.
nihilistic
No,
philosophy there.
yeah, and
Yeah,
I would say that that's dialectics. Okay, in what sense the answer? Suppose that you gave a certain answer, Jean-Sébastien, but that answer at the conceptual level would make you be in touch with the true flame inside you.
It's as
That
good
would
as you
be
answer with the true flame inside you.
exact. That would be the true answer, and not the answer with words that
The
you
answer is
are
the
giving.
sublime that it brings forth from us, I'd say.
You see, okay, so,
Now we're
and that
getting
is
to the sublime.
and that is precisely true philosophy. And because true philosophy is not a play of words, even if I'm myself guilty of playing with words, but those play with words is to make you be in contact with that inner flame. And that
philosophy
should have never left the school.
What it comes down to, it's what we do with all this higher knowledge, like we're talking about it, but then when we go offline, we go into our lives, and I'm sure we practice what we preach, no?
No, but it's true that
Or we try it at least.
Kwan said that what we learn is making us a more hedgy tool in real life, and I think so too, because since I decided to go in a more cultivated way of living a couple years ago, everything that I do is getting better result, much better result, and I get more a good entente feeling with other strangers. It's easier to get in business, and everything is better when you are educated.
absolutely. One of the guys in the painting said, I think, if you have it, all the rest will follow.
Yeah.
Yep, I would say that's true. Quality of conversation.
That comes to a question I had for Matt. The purpose of your work with us right now, and the other class Sunday, and when you're gonna go at Ontario with Cynthia and everything about this, there's a goal, and I think there's two goals. There's the rejoindre l'utile à l'agréable. So the use of this is a work life, but the agréable should be having the hope. And that's the question I am giving you. Are you doing all of this to give, to raise the aristocratic mind in or people of Canada in a way? So
hang on. Let's not discriminate. Not just people from Canada.
Oh, from everywhere, from everywhere.
Anyone who
watches. He is
Canadian,
and I am too. That's why we badly need intellect in our state.
I would just suggest that Matthew and Cynthia's influences are far more than just Canada.
Yeah, for sure, for
Oh,
sure.
well,
But
well, that's why
we need it
I
here.
appreciate that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
What's your
it's
goal in all this? That's the question. Plain
oh
without me.
yeah, trying to do the good, and enjoy doing the good. I don't know what else are you gonna do, right?
Yeah, man, I love it. I love it.
I mean, even just creating the discussion, as far as I'm concerned, is doing the good.
I thought
Mhm.
so.
I mean,
Yeah, like
what you were just
we all
talking
just
about,
we can
Jean.
only do
Jean
so much, right? Like based on our knowledge level and how much
yeah,
there's more that
yeah.
I would like to do, and I think we'd all like to always strive to be better instruments for the good. But no matter what, if we're vibrating on that frequency, we're going to be resonating with the universe. So regardless
And
of amplitude,
yeah,
so might
and
as well just try to keep
connecting with people,
keep doing that
connecting
and
with
getting better
people.
at it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I try
I
to
certainly
connect with
find that in the
people with
conversations that I
values.
have in my community, the music community, the conversations have simply become more interesting. People
Yeah,
know what I do.
absolutely.
They know that I do more than just bang away on drums and everything like that. So there's often conversations about the state of the world, etc., etc. And whilst nobody avers to me as the expert or anything like that, they at least respect that I have a level of knowledge of some things that makes my conversation worth listening to, that raises
Yeah.
questions in their own mind, however simplistic, however conspiratorial that might be considered and everything like that. I just find that over the last couple of years, particularly, that the quality of the conversations, the questions being asked,
Yeah.
Hmm.
not from me, but by others, and that the topics that we discuss, if you like, have broadened and become much more. If I say intellectually interesting, I mean more than just intellectually. Reason comes into it, emotion comes into it, of course. But to me, the quality of the conversations over the last couple of years as a result of things that I do here and elsewhere has improved enormously. So
Mm.
I would put that under the heading of everything that you do, Matt, too. That you put it out there, you can't know what the effect is, you can't count the numbers, etc., etc.
You just
I
hope it
would I
goes
would
to the
suggest
better.
that it's a profound influence, though.
But
Very
indeed,
profound
it's
influence.
better have people sharing good influence than people
Yeah,
sharing bad influence. And we got enough of those Hollywood star doing it by the exponential. We need to get this back.
yeah. Well, would we rather be talking about the Trump Harris
Oh,
debate, for
please no,
example,
please no. Yeah, yeah.
as opposed to climbing up the rarefied atmosphere of metaphysics, etc. However much I don't understand, I would still much rather be here trying to learn about it than discussing the politics of debates like that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it
Even if it's
definitely
only
gives the
what
soul
half,
strength to
even if
look
it,
at to trudge through a lot of the garbage
yeah, even if it's
geopolitical
only half a
crap that you
dozen.
have to like look at and pay attention to. I
Yeah,
would get sick to my stomach and vomit if I didn't have a lot of metaphysical thoughts
yeah,
that are
yeah.
holding me on a North Star because it can get
It
stupid.
it
Stupid land is
it might
stupid land,
only
right?
be it might only be half a dozen of us here, but we will all benefit enormously from this discussion as
Yeah.
compared to had we decided to sit back and collectively enjoy a debate between those two idiots.
I think so too.
Yeah,
Guys, this is cool. I like I said at the beginning, I know Virgil, you missed this, but Cynthia and I will be traveling for 3 weeks, so we're gonna have a little sabbatical. Feel free to read ahead. Definitely
yeah.
take notes, and when we careen back in Montreal in October, we'll get back on this again, and we'll keep the dialogue flowing. Until then, the Sunday meetings are still going to keep happening, even while we're out and about. And for those who don't know, Ed Lazansky and I are doing these every 2 weeks American University in Moscow
Yeah.
roundtables. We have like Alex Craner. We're going to get Pepe Escobar. Like there's going to be a lot of people coming and speaking in roundtables every 2 weeks. Last one we had, Peter Kuznick, Hall Gardner, a couple of pretty good analysts, and a good audience of 46 people, but not a lot of young people. We want to try to get the under 50 crowd as well, so disproportionately represented by the over 70. Um, and that's great. That's great. But we got to balance it out with some younger blood too. So Virgil, I'm looking at you, buddy. If you can come, that'd be great. But I'll keep sending out the invitations for those things too.
Yeah, I think I will show up to that. Hi, everyone. By the way, I came in late today. I'm very new to all this material, but I very much enjoy this discussion and completely agree, especially with what everyone just said. And I am of the younger generation, I guess. I mean, I'm not going to speculate on everyone's age, but I'm 30 years old, and I I'm not gonna lie, I feel a lot more pessimistic, let's say, about the surroundings that I often find myself in, especially among my peers a little bit, you know. I have a lot of good friends who have their mind in the right place, but
Same for
um,
my son. The more you're young, the more you're desperate, because the more the people of your age
yeah,
are not open-minded. That's a reality.
I have a
yes,
question
it's
for you,
really bad.
Virgil. I
Yeah,
have a
go ahead.
question for you. Because you are younger, would you have any suggestions like how older people can get younger people interested in some of these topics? Like, is there
Like I'm only
Music
30
and
years
video
old, right? And
game.
I'm already I'm gonna be honest, I'm already struggling with that myself.
Oh,
Like
but
with
for
kids
for
younger
real,
than my age. Yeah.
like it seems
you
to be a
know,
paradox? Like, you know,
Yeah.
so many
Yeah,
young people like I go to church and young people don't want to go to church, you
mm,
yeah.
know, and that's
but young
a
people
starting
love
point.
variant of the church. Like I know people who go at something called the Bible and beer. So Christian gets in a bar, drinks, and talk Christian. This way, more youngster go to
Mm.
this in Quebec. It's my ex who was holding this thing. And if I had a suggestion for how to captivate the young, I seen games that aren't messed up games made by good people trying to share information, I'd say, like Romance of the Three Kingdom. You play this game, you know all of the wars that been passed on from 1100 to 1200 to 1600. So there's games that
So
can
make things
help.
fun,
So we gotta make game
interesting,
for them.
or like try at least.
Jean-Sébastien,
Something.
I'm a little bit shocked because the Three Kingdoms is a
You know,
period between 220 and 280.
I'm not so sure
So
of the date.
maybe it's a very free interpretation of the Three Kingdom period.
About the
But
time with Cao Cao, Liu Bei, and
well,
the time. And
precisely.
yeah,
Well,
I'm not sure about the timeline, but I remember this game when I was young. And when I got in
Okay.
school, they said, "Oh, you already know Genghis Khan and all the." So it
well,
was good.
Cao Cao and Liu Bei is precisely between 220 and 280.
Okay.
And I am a pain in the neck, but Genghis Khan is in the 13th century.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
a
After,
thousand
but
years later.
I
So
mixed two games. There's Romance of the Three Kingdom for this part, and Genghis Khan is in another game,
okay,
Strategic of the Europa. I mean, so
I am a promoter of timelessness, but I am quite a maniac in time precision.
well, thanks, because I don't have the good date, so it's good if you can add it to what I say. All
I'm
right,
lucky
dudes.
because one of the things about the world that I occupy
Oh,
in relation to younger people, particularly the world of music,
oh,
and I didn't find this in Australia. I moved here when I was 60, for example, and I wouldn't say my career was washed up in Australia, but there is a dichotomy between the older crowd and the younger crowd, which doesn't exist here in Manila. Every time I do a performance here, the crowd is likely to be from age 20 and plenty of kids around as well, younger kids,
oh.
and people of my age and more. It spans everything. And that's what I mean by the kind of conversations that I have can be short. You know, they're not long conversations necessarily, but there is a breadth to them. You know, the inquiry, if you like, of younger people, you know, the enthusiasm for learning, etc., and then the wisdom of some of the older people as well. It's just an interesting mix that I find myself in the middle of.
Seems like
People,
Australia
I
has
don't.
good
Yeah.
people.
The other thing too is I feel like I can actually speak my mind. I don't have to self-censor too much. You know, if I start talking about, you know, the events of the pandemic and everything like that, it's not like everybody walks away and says this guy's off on, you know, conspiracy theory tangent. Forget it. You know, he plays good drums, but don't talk to him about anything else.
You're
It's
from
it's
Australia.
exactly the reverse. Yes, I'm from Australia originally.
Do you know the movement Global Walkout? It was a girl with blonde hair that made this movement, global walkout,
No, I
2
haven't
years
heard of
ago.
it. There's a lot of things happening in Australia, undercurrents, if you like, but they're very, very far from the mainstream. The
Okay.
mainstream of Australia is much like the mainstream of Canada, unfortunately. Maybe not quite so
Oh,
brutal and
but
open.
global walkout was not mainstream.
Yeah.
It was like militant who wanted to get out of society. And I think they made
Yeah,
their own city, and
yeah,
everybody
yeah.
left one big
I,
city at one time, 2
Hey
years
guys,
ago.
I'm so sorry. I got a 10 o'clock that I got to jump onto and run to the bathroom
we've got
beforehand.
to
So I got to
interrupt.
let
Yeah,
y'all
okay.
go. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
Ciao.
no
Till next
worries.
one. Bye, guys.
We'll
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Hey,
Thank you.
goodbye, everyone.
Bye,
See
guys.
you
catch you in a
soon.
month or so.
Yes, sir.
Okay.